The seven wonders of the ancient world. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the Colossus of Rhodes, the Lighthouse of Alexandria, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the Temple of Artemis, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, and the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. We've all heard of these epic structures, although low-key nobody remembers the Mausoleum. But how much do you actually know about them? As I'll show you, less than you thought. I'm History with Dino, welcome back to another episode. I promise that the wonders hold some surprises. Okay, before we get into the wonders themselves, we need to attack a common misconception. Take a look at this chart from Wikipedia. Notice this part about Philo of Byzantium? Philo lived from about 280 to 220 BC, and he certainly could have seen all the wonders. Here's the thing. He's used as a benchmark because he wrote a treatise titled The Seven Wonders, describing them. Except the poor mausoleum, because that part is lost. The problem is that, there was more than one guy ever named Philo from Byzantium. The one who wrote this treatise about our wonders lived sometime in the 4th or 5th centuries AD, which, if we redraw the line, means he never even saw two of the wonders. Actually, 3, since the Colossus of Rhodes was in ruins after 226. So just know that you and I are on the same page as the recognized description of these epic structures. But all that doesn't even get into the secrets of the wonders themselves. Let's start with the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. First, a quick description. Lush gardens, rising high above the lower city in ascending tiers, watered by impressive water screws. A beautiful and unforgettable sight. But now for the important part. We have no idea if the gardens existed at all. No archaeological evidence of any massive gardens at Babylon, not a single mud brick or aqueduct that could be used as evidence. The construction date of approximately 600 BC under King Nebuchadnezzar II is only based off one ancient text attributing the gardens to his reign, and the problem is there's no true Babylonian sources that attest it. Nebuchadnezzar II has tons of preserved inscriptions, but none of them mention any gardens at all, and no Greek description of the city mentions them either. Archaeologically, there's a little problem. Half of Babylon is under the Euphrates River, so it's kind of hard to excavate. But don't worry, the gardens might have existed, just not in Babylon. The Assyrian king Sennacherib built extensive gardens at Nineveh in the early 7th century, about 100 years earlier, and the sites might have just been confused. This garden is attested in inscriptions, and it fits all of the descriptions about impressive irrigation systems and awesome gardens. Okay, so wonder number 1 is somehow in a completely different place than we thought. What about wonder number 2? The Colossus of Rhodes is famous for literally being a giant statue. It was built from the spoils that the Rhodians got from surviving the siege of Demetrius and his city taker in 305 BC. It was made of bronze plating supported by iron bars on the inside, and it was filled up with rocks, so it didn't blow away or anything. The statue was of the sun god Helios. If you've ever seen a depiction of the Colossus, it probably looked a bit like this, straddling the harbor. But this is supremely unlikely, and seems to have been a medieval interpretation, because not only would a statue built like that have collapsed, but it also would have severely limited the operation of the harbor. I mean, either way, the statue collapsed pretty fast anyway, because after 56 years, an earthquake hit Rhodes, and everything above the knees came crashing down. It was never put back up and just kind of laid on the ground, supposedly for the next couple hundred years. The statue would have been slowly dismantled and the bronze repurposed for other things, but maybe our friend Philo saw this tipped over statue. Also, we have no idea where the statue actually was. Since it fell on the ground, it couldn't have been right at the mouth of the harbor, but the actual location remains a mystery. In terms of destruction, maybe it shares some similarity with the next wonder. That next wonder would be the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus. This one was destroyed 3 different times. First, it was a small Bronze Age temple. However, it was rebuilt in 550 BC. This is considered the beginning of the temple that was actually one of the 7 wonders. However, this rebuilt temple sadly burned down 200 years later, on purpose, because apparently this guy named Herostratus set it on fire to try and get famous, which clearly worked since me, the random guy on the internet, is talking about him 2,000 years later. Modern scholars have since questioned whether that actually happened, but I think it's a good story, so. Anyway, after that, the temple was rebuilt, this final version was the biggest by a lot. It was extensively columned, almost 150 meters long and 20 meters tall, and it was decorated with tons of statues, paintings, and precious metals. An important religious site, it remained standing in Ephesus for around 600 years before eventually being burned in the mid-260s AD. Who did it this time? Well, likely it was invading Goths. The temple, which would have continued to exist as a ruin, was eventually closed in the next 2 centuries as the area became Christian. But that mid-260s destruction date also means something else. Freaking Philo didn't see this one either. Now, the next wonder, the statue of Zeus at Olympia, that would have existed during the lifetime of Philo, right? Well, maybe. That statue was originally built in the 5th century BC, probably around the 430s, and it was located inside the Temple of Zeus at Olympia. Showing Zeus, the king of the Greek gods, it was built out of ivory and gold plates. But there are no existing copies of the statue. However, we do know that it showed Zeus sitting down, and it was supposedly around 12 meters tall. Just like the statue of Athena in the Parthenon, one hand held a smaller statue of the goddess of victory, Nike. Clearly, this was an awesome statue. But it was also a slippery one. The reason for this is that they apparently kept the statue coated in olive oil so that the ivory wouldn't be degraded by the regional environmental conditions, aka just humid air. But what actually happened to the statue is unclear. It could have been looted in parts as early as 391, when the temple was closed and pagan worship banned. One historian, about 700 years later, has claimed that it was moved to Constantinople and destroyed in a fire in 475. This is the date Wikipedia uses on their chart, but maybe the statue was destroyed in 425 when the Temple of Olympian Zeus caught fire. The real reason any of this matters, at least to me, is that any time after 391, we do not know if the statue still existed. And if Philo lived in the 4th or 5th centuries, well, you can see the overlap. That leaves us with 3 more wonders that our friend Philo definitely could have seen. But just remember, he already BS'd some of this, so there's no guarantee he actually went outside to go see these ones either. Now, for the always forgotten Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. But it's not as lame as you'd think. Have you ever heard of a mausoleum? It's a big fancy tomb. But this was the original mausoleum. It was built by the satrap of Caria, Mausolus, to bury himself. His tomb was so incredible that eventually people started calling all tombs mausoleums. Built in the 350s BC, Mausolus and his wife employed tons of architects and sculptors, including some of the very same ones who had rebuilt the Temple of Artemis. The temple was about 45 meters tall, featured large columns holding up the roof with statues of warriors in between them. All of this was on top of a giant stone platform with the tomb in the middle. The tomb then itself was covered in battle scenes. Finally, the whole thing was capped with a pyramid for a roof, which I guess kind of renders obsolete another one of these wonders. The top of the roof flattened out, leaving room for a 4-horse chariot statue holding statues of Mausolus and his wife Artemisia. It's just amazing. I shrunk the bottom to make the picture fit, but reconstructions make the base even larger. What actually happened to the tomb is very unclear, but it's generally assumed that it was destroyed by earthquakes in the 13th or 14th centuries. After that, Catholic knights reused many of the stones in their nearby castle. They also ground up a lot of the marble, turning it into lime that could be used in the plaster. That was the end of the poor mausoleum, but fear not, another wonder survived this long as well. And that would be the Lighthouse of Alexandria, built in the mid-3rd century BC under Ptolemy II. That's right, the very same guy who married his sister. Anyway, the lighthouse, around 100 meters tall, was one of the tallest buildings in the ancient world, if not the tallest. But note, numbers provided in ancient accounts are often inaccurate and very unconfirmable, so being certain is difficult. The lighthouse was made up of 3 different stages. A furnace in the top level furnished the flame for the actual light part of the lighthouse. However, there was also a mirror at the top to reflect sunlight for this purpose during the day. On top of the lighthouse stood a statue of either Zeus or Poseidon. Unfortunately, due to its location, the lighthouse was plagued by earthquake after earthquake. From 796 to 1323, the structure was progressively weakened by these quakes and needed repeated repairs. Eventually, the Sultan of Egypt gave up on repairing it and just built a fort on the lighthouse's platform. Interestingly, though, that means 3 of the wonders were destroyed by earthquakes. The 7th wonder stands out, though. Not only is it way older than all the other wonders, but it still remains standing today. That would be, of course, the Great Pyramid of Giza, built around 2600 BC. It's ancient. The original height of the pyramid, almost 150 meters tall, made it the tallest structure in the world for almost 3,900 years. I don't think I need to describe the pyramid much for you guys. 4 sides, vaguely pointy on top. You know the drill. Actually, the pyramid originally had a capstone, but it's been lost for thousands of years, so originally it was very pointy. Most of the rocks were assorted sizes, with only the inner and outermost ones being carefully carved. And the outside of the pyramid, originally, was cased in white limestone. It meant the outside was super smooth and shiny. However, this limestone was first removed in the Middle Ages, leaving us with the rough exterior we all see today. More were removed for mosque construction in the early 1800s. Multiple chambers exist in the pyramid, which were initially intended for the burial of the pharaoh Khufu. These have all been looted, but one thing does remain: a giant block of granite, hollowed out, the original sarcophagus. Aside from being extremely heavy, the coffin is wider than any of the passages, so it's been inside the room since construction. And the Egyptians, they did something special with the Great Pyramid that none of the other constructors could. They built something earthquake-proof. Now, you know about the 7 wonders of the ancient world, and about Philo, the guy who maybe saw some of them. Let me know your favorite wonder in the comments. Thank you for watching History with Dino. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon with some more content. Thank you. Beep 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 boop.